It all began a week after my mother's passing, and I thought that I couldn't be in any worse emotional state. That was before the letter dropped in my mailbox. It was supposedly written by my father, who left my mother before I was even born. The mail contained a note telling me he was dead and asked forgiveness for not being there. There was also a key leading to a safe deposit box. I thought about just throwing it away, but I had always wondered who my father was, and I just couldn't let it go. After an internal struggle, my curiosity won, and I headed to the bank where the box was deposited. In the box was an old book, written in some strange language unknown to me. There were also some notes that I figured must be in my father's handwriting. The text in the notes was hard to read, but after some effort I found out that a lot of them were about a place somewhere in Greenland. I wondered if this place might give me some clues about my late father. Days went by, and I couldn't get this place in Greenland off my mind. I knew I had to go there. Finally, I took a flight to Greenland, and after landing, I had to hitch a ride with a fishing boat. As we arrived at shore, ominous clouds were gathering in the sky. It seemed like a storm was on the way. Despite warnings from the fishermen, I started walking towards my destination. Now that I was close, I couldn't just stop and rest. As I was walking, a strange sensation went through my body. I wondered what was waiting for me out there. A half an hour later, I was caught in a fierce storm. Perhaps I should have listened to the fishermen. I struggled on blindly and thought I was about to die from exposure when I found some sheltering rocks. As I crawled under the rocks, I hit something hard and metallic. A hatch. Somehow I knew this was what I was looking for. I gripped the handle and pulled it open using all my remaining strength. Slowly, I stepped into the unknown.
For my part in this allegory, I'm not going to make the same mistakes my father made. Howard vanished from my mother's life before I was even in it. So when he sent me a letter a few days after Mum's funeral, it was the first I'd ever heard from him. Pity he was dead. Writing from beyond the grave must be a genetic habit in my bloodline. His letter contained a key, instructions, pleas for forgiveness. I figured the dead don't have much use for absolution, so I turned to his prophetic passing, which he inexplicably expected to come any day. Clearly averse to explanations, my father preferred to leave directions to a bank on Mayfair I'd never even heard of. In that bank was a safety deposit box in his name, and myself as executor. Of course, I went, as he knew I would. I discovered that, despite the evidence, he'd been legally declared dead almost 30 years ago, and so the old book and collection of notes I found had, in the eyes of the law, been mine all this time. My father's instructions were to burn the documents, raise no further questions. But that was his error. No man's immune to the shameful trappings of curiosity, and my humanity got the better of me. The university I taught at was world-renowned for two things: physics and linguistics. I represented the first, and the man who stood for the second was stumped by my recent acquisition. The book was indecipherable. The notes, however, showed a location somewhere in uninhabited northern Greenland. It took me almost a year to book the last flight I'd ever take. As I watched civilization disappear along with Heathrow, I realised my father had disappeared 3 decades ago, almost to the day. And I considered in turn what it was that I was leaving behind. We landed on a strip of ice a few feet wide, and within minutes I was pulling away on a chartered boat, beginning the 12-hour journey that would lead me into my past.
Without this knowledge, without this foundation, you could not have the will to do what I must now ask of you. I followed my father to the Greenland wastes to uncover his secrets. You had to know how far I was willing to go. I found a disused mining shaft and took shelter from the storm. You had to know how desperate I was. I was plagued by doubts, fears, and mysteries, and aided by a madman, Red. You had to know how lonely I was. I incinerated my best friend. Red told me he wanted to die. You had to know how guilty I felt. I ventured boldly onwards, and was struck down by my own heroics. You had to know how stupid I was. All of these things. So human, so perfect. And yet still I fail to do what I must now ask of you.
Everyone can plan one step ahead, but it does not mean that everything happens the way you've predicted. I expected to find my father, to learn all his secrets, but I was too late. With my own hands, I killed all of my friends. I did not even get to see them. Only the annoying, duplicitous voice never left me, always irritating the unhealed wounds of my soul. And finally, it found a way to destroy it. But even that was not the end. Tungate is the reason for everything that has happened to me. It showed me its world and started to trust me, but I betrayed it. It was yet another of my mistakes. Surviving all this miraculously didn't make me lose my mind, but now I feel like I'm going insane after all.